Thank you. Oh, it is so wonderful to be here in Austin, Texas. And as you saw from the film, that was me 26 years ago trying to explain to the Senate. And now I am still trying to explain, but not my testimony. What we are trying to explain now is something that is basic, something that is fundamental and shouldn't even be questioned. And that is that women and girls are entitled to work and be educated in places free of sexual harassment and assault. I want to thank Debbie McClure for that wonderful introduction. I want to thank every one of you for joining me in that declaration today. And I'm going to continue, and I have been continuing for the past 26 years because we knew somewhere in our hearts, at least I did, and I hope you believe too, that this day would come. And indeed, we are in a new day, but it didn't happen by chance. So today, with the time I have, I want us to look back at the past 2.5 decades as we move forward into this moment of great possibility for gender equity. And I'm going to start with some background because some of you, I'm looking out, some of you are my age and you started your careers in the 1970s. And I want us to think about where we were with the issue of sexual harassment in the 1970s when we started out. Title VII, the law protecting against sexual harassment, had been in place for about a decade. But a 1976 Red Book magazine poll found that 9 out of 10 women had been subjected to unwanted sexual advances at the workplace. When brave women stood up to complain, to protect their rights in the 70s and even into the 80s, judges were more likely to conclude that these were personal matters, not matters of legal rights. It took a Supreme Court case in 1986 to finally declare that sexual harassment, sexual extortion, and sexually riddled workplaces were a violation of the law. Yet, as late as the 90s, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the federal agency in charge of enforcing anti-harassment, had only begun to develop enforcement guidelines. And despite that, I'm going to shift a little bit because I'm talking about not only the workplace sexual harassment, but I'm also talking about what goes on in college campuses. And this will be more familiar to some of you who are younger members of this audience. In 1980, a federal court declared that colleges and universities had to step up to do their part to protect students against sexual harassment and sexual assault. And the law to do that was Title IX. Nevertheless, the Education Department gave little guidance about how to protect campuses, how to keep sexual assault from happening, how to process sexual assault and harassment complaints. In 1991, I received a letter from a chaplain, a college chaplain who told me that he and his staff were typically the only resources for students, staff, and faculty who had been harassed or assaulted on campus. They were the go-to people, but they had no money, they had no investigative authority, and they had no power to punish if they found that there had been abuse. And here's one dirty little secret that we haven't still come to terms with. I had mentioned judges before who thought these were personal matters. In the 1990s, the American Bar Association did a survey of women in the legal profession, and they found that judges were themselves harassers. Indeed, women lawyers reported that judges solicited sexual favors from women who came before them, including juvenile court wards, jurors, and court employees. Let's not mince words. A toxic culture of harassment existed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. and workers and students were left on their own to navigate the abuses we encountered. Most didn't complain, and no wonder, because we thought this is just life. And even decades after the laws had passed to protect against it, many women didn't even know they had the right to complain. Now, against this backdrop, the Senate Judiciary Committee subpoenaed me. And they subpoenaed me to testify about sexual harassment that I had experienced when I worked for Clarence Thomas. Now, I know what you're thinking now. The odds were really against me. Why couldn't I have figured that out? And maybe I did know. But I also know that I offered my testimony of his character and lack of fitness for a lifetime appointment in the country's highest court, because it was the right thing to do. The matter was not just of my personal civil rights, it was the integrity of the court. The court and its integrity and the integrity of its membership is and was then at stake, as was access to equal justice for all. So days after my testimony, the gavel fell and Clarence Thomas was confirmed. And seemingly nothing that I said mattered. Polls showed that women and men thought that Clarence Thomas deserved to be on the Supreme Court. A majority of both categories. People of all races thought that he should be on the court. Many people, some of them the senators, even accused me of setting women back. But I was fortunate. Unlike many women who I see who come forward, I was blessed. In fact, I had a loving, devoted family who believed in me, who supported me, who bolstered me and carried me through the darkest days. And they are still with me here today. And I do have some family members here with me today, and I am ever, ever thankful for them. Media pundits, however, predicted that no woman would ever come forward after witnessing the treatment that I received. There would be no more sexual harassment complaints filed. Now, we know that the media pundits were wrong. Women, in fact, came forward. But the pundits weren't just wrong about the numbers. The pundits were wrong because they underestimated the will of women to stop the abuses that they had been experiencing. And that is what we have to keep in mind, that you may get messages to tell you that you are weak or you are powerless or you are not brave enough to come forward. But we know better. We know that we can tap into our own power and our own sense of what is right and wrong to step up, to make a difference in our lives and in the lives of people who we care about, and all women. So after the Thomas confirmation hearing, just to prove the pundits wrong, working women mobilized their rights, and complaints to the EEOC and to other sources in private places, they soared. In fact, the EEOC complaints doubled in a matter of 2 years. Employees made demands on their employers to put in place policies and procedures where none existed. And some employees acted in the best interest of their employees. And much of our progress occurred because women privately shared long-held secrets with families and friends, stories about their own abuse that they had never spoken of before, got talked about around the kitchen table. And we should never underestimate the power that those story sharings have in moving us forward as a society to accept the truth of our experiences. So at this time, I would like to give a hand to those brave women who came forward in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. They didn't have a hashtag, they didn't have social media, and many operated alone. But they have made possible today's truth-telling and advocacy. So can we just give a hand? Some of you are out here in this audience, and I want to congratulate you and thank you for bringing us where we are today. Thank you. Now, one of the the best things I think that has happened is that we have raised a generation of advocates. And I see them on college campuses. And in the last few years, of course, young women and men on these campuses are making the issue of sexual campus harassment and assault. They're bringing it out of the shadows, and they are bringing their stories forward. And as a person who is on a college campus, I can tell you that we are all better for that movement. Since 1991, the Supreme Court has issued landmark decisions articulating sexual harassment protections. Schools have been held responsible for protecting students from peer and faculty harassment. Faculty and students have been punished after investigations, thorough investigations. Colleges and universities have also held groups accountable for sexual misconduct. And one of the important events in the workplace is that large-scale farm operators have been penalized and have to pay victims for sexual assault that occurs among migrant workers, in many cases, some of the most vulnerable workers. Private and government agencies are working harder to put forward claims in courts that will establish precedent that will allow future claims to come forward. And the EEOC is working with advocates and businesses on prevention strategies. Now that is all of the good news. But if you've read the papers lately, you know that there is good news that women are coming forward, but there is bad news, in fact, horrific news, that in fact, sexual harassment is still a rampant problem in our workplaces throughout the country. How many of you participated in the #MeToo campaign? Thank you. Thank you all for doing that and for sharing your stories. They will support many women who want to come forward, but still bear the shame of sexual harassment and assault on their own shoulders. Today, 1 to 3 women between 18 and 34 are victims. These are the ones who say they are victims. And that number is actually growing because there are still women who will not admit it. The targets of sexual harassment range from Hollywood stars to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and those entrepreneurs whose fates lie in the hands of venture capitalists. Their entire careers may be at stake. But to me, they are no different than the restaurant workers who rely on tips to make a living wage, who are being harassed routinely, and it is being accepted in those places as just normal. Victims come in every class, race, age, shape, sexual identity, gender identity, color, and religious category. Women in the military on mission to protect our country too often, and once is too often, fall victim to harassment and assault. Few victims file claims, but 60% of those, according to the EEOC, who do file claims face retaliation. These are shameful facts and statistics. Yet, there are the deniers who don't think that the stories and the statistics matter, or even if they do matter, Maybe they aren't even true. Sexual misconduct deniers have allies in high places, and they want to control the narrative. Media pundits like George Will attack campus assault policies, calling them inventions of progressives who want to promote victimhood as a coveted status, and that's his quote. Once again, a pundit is wrong. I've been a victim. It is not a sought-after position. And the deniers also include bystanders. We're learning this as we read the stories in the papers today. They are the boards of directors, for example, of the Weinstein Corporation. They are the attorneys who put together contracts and agreements, the settlements that demand that people remain silent about their abuse. And they are the others. All of the others who appear to have enabled, say, Harvey Weinstein and Roger Ailes, and so many others that we read about today. Yet, I'm here to say that the energy and even the anger of this moment says that we are ready to end sexual harassment. We are ready to take on the deniers. We are ready to share our truth. And I will say that as I look out in this room, I am ready to believe that we outnumber those people who are the deniers and the enablers and the abusers. And we are louder than they are. So speaking of loud, in 1991, even after, and maybe because of the venomous and unfounded attacks on my character, I found my voice. And I will never lose it again, not as long as this problem exists. And I know that you and millions around the world have found yours as well. This moment starts with us. It starts when we affirm our own value and our self-worth. And I'm just going to list a few things that I want you to listen to and take in and absorb because I'm not sure that we know it. We must never accept sexual harassment or assault as something that men do, just something that men do. And there is that language that tries to normalize sexual harassment. It's not like drinking out of the milk carton, folks. It is predatory behavior, and we must call it out as that at every time that we witness it. We will not require scores of women to come forward. There doesn't have to be scores of women coming forward to complain in order to believe one woman. We have had that happen far too many times, where we wait for dozens of women to come forward and then one woman we believe. Our word is as trustworthy as our abusers. We will not stop with sexual harassment. We will protest other forms of discrimination, like pay and assignment disparities, biased reviews, being passed over and denied promotions that we have earned, and in some cases, train the person who gets the promotion for. And this is important, folks. We will not let our perceived differences in appearance or who we love to divide us and separate us. We are here to act in a united voice to say that women deserve to be valued and respected in our workplaces and in our schools and on our streets. So let's start. Let's share our stories. Somewhere, share your stories. You can do it on social media. You can do it in your kitchens, in your homes, with your friends. You can do it when you file complaints. If you have any clout in your business, use it to provide victims a safe system to come forward in and demand punishment for those who violate our sisters, mothers, and daughters. And remember, everyone, every woman is someone's daughter. And even when those abusers are people who we otherwise call friends and hold in esteem, we must not let them get away with just a slap on the wrist if they are serial and repeated violators. It is never, ever appropriate just to sort of pat them on the back and say, don't do that again, or even pass them along to another business where they can continue to behave in this way. And it's certainly never to give them awards. It's never appropriate to give them awards and millions of dollars in severance pays, as we've seen. Use your leverage in professional organizations. And until you know the facts of a person, if there are rumors about abusive behavior, do not honor the people who are accused. Wait until you find out the facts before you give them awards. Remember what happened. Look at all of the awards that Harvey Weinstein had, even though there were rumors out there. And somewhere in your sphere, whether it's inside your workplace or through an organization that you know, there are people who we have heard have abused, and yet we see them being honored. This is a protective guise that has been used over and over against accusers. One more thing. Call, write, or email your representative in Congress and the Senate and tell them to move on laws to protect our women and men in the armed forces from sexual assault. It is inexcusable. We have to use our voices to make them and us safer. And I'm just going to finish here and just saying that it is time for us to draw upon our most courageous selves, to dream a world that is harassment-free. Now, some of you are going to say, oh, that's unreasonable, that's too ambitious. But I would just say that a harassment-free world is only what we deserve. So dream it. If you cannot dream it, you will never see it. So dream with me today. I am often asked by many people if I would do what I did in 1991 and testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee about my experience, testifying so publicly, if I would do it again. And my answer is yes. Yes, I would do it again. It was the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do now, to keep speaking. And I can do it again. I can do it again because I have a wonderful family who supports me, and I can do it again because of you. You give me hope. You give me energy. You inspire me. So Austin, Texas, I want to say, let's dream together. Let's build together. And let's start today. Thank you.